Welcome to The Explainer. So if you've ever found yourself standing in front of the fridge at 11 p.m., kind of just staring into the void, wondering if a midnight snack is going to completely derail your recovery, well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're unpacking a really groundbreaking field study from the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, and it tackles this exact question using some fascinating data from elite athletes. Okay, let's kick things off with a number that is honestly pretty wild. 6%. That is the tiny, tiny fraction of sports science studies conducted exclusively on women. Just think about that for a second. For decades, the vast majority of everything we know about athletic performance, nutrition, and recovery has been gathered from male subjects, and then those conclusions are just sort of broadly applied to women. But let's be real, because of inherent physiological differences, you literally cannot just copy-paste male data onto female athletes. And that's exactly why this field study is so exciting. It's actively trying to close that massive data gap. All right, let's dive into the setup. Tracking elite athletes. The researchers went all in. They monitored 14 NCAA Division I female soccer players around the clock over an entire competitive season to get authentic, real-world data right in the middle of all that intense pressure. So how did they actually pull this off? Well, every single athlete wore a WHOB band continuously on their wrist. These trackers use triaxial accelerometers and optical heart rate sensors to capture all their sleep and cardiovascular metrics. Alongside the tech, they logged their habitual food intake every 3 days, with a laser focus on pre-sleep nutrition, basically meaning anything they ate within 2 hours of hitting the pillow. The researchers then took all this dietary data and matched it right up against how long they slept, how often they tossed and turned, and their overall physiological recovery the next morning. Now, those Whoop bands zeroed in on two main recovery metrics. First up is resting heart rate, or RHR. It's basically your cardiovascular baseline, tracking how efficiently the athlete's systems were bouncing back from all that previous strain while they were at complete rest. And the second metric is heart rate variability, HRV. As you probably know, a higher HRV is exactly what you want. It means your autonomic nervous system is highly receptive, perfectly balancing those sympathetic and parasympathetic states, and your body is physically primed to crush it the next day. Which brings us to the midnight snack dilemma. We've all heard the common lore, right? Don't eat before bed, it'll ruin your sleep. But then you look at clinical labs, and they're telling us that chugging huge doses of pre-sleep protein is absolutely essential to maximize overnight muscle recovery. So which is it in the real world for these Division I athletes? To figure this out, researchers divided the athletes' late-night food intake into high and low categories, looking at calories, carbs, fats, and protein. Then they crunched those numbers against their next-day recovery scores. Did grabbing a snack within 2 hours of lights out actually ruin their sleep and tank those recovery metrics? The answer is a resounding no. Nope, not at all. The researchers found completely null results across the board. Late-night snacking had basically zero significant negative or positive impact on these athletes' sleep and recovery. Let's systematically break this down because it's fascinating. When they compared the nights these athletes ate more food versus the nights they ate less or even nothing at all before bed, there was absolutely no change in how long they slept, no change in how often they woke up during the night. There was no significant effect on their resting heart rate and no significant effect on their heart rate variability. Honestly, whether they loaded up on carbs, fats, or just higher total calories before hitting the pillow, the needle on the recovery essentially didn't budge. But wait, here is the twist. Context behind the data. Why didn't we see those massive muscle recovery benefits that all the lab studies promise? Or, for that matter, the terrible sleep disturbances that fitness gurus are always warning us about? To figure that out, we have to pull the science out of the textbook and look at what these women were actually eating in real life. Let's look at the actual macronutrients here. On average, these elite athletes were consuming about 330 calories before bed. That broke down to roughly 46 grams of carbs, 12 grams of fat, and a mere 7.6 grams of protein. So basically, they were just eating small, normal snacks. A handful of popcorn, maybe a cheese stick, a cup of yogurt, or a couple of cookies. They certainly weren't sitting down to massive, heavy meals right before turning out the lights. And this right here highlights the massive, glaring disconnect between real-world habits and clinical lab conditions. In this field study, a high protein intake was categorized as anything over 5 grams. 5 grams, that's literally a cheese stick. But the lab studies that promise massive overnight recovery, they're forcing participants to chug specialized shakes packed with 30 to 40 grams of protein. These female athletes simply weren't consuming anywhere near the volume of protein required to trigger those extreme overnight muscle-building adaptations. Now here is where it gets super interesting. The athletes who consumed the higher amount of protein, again, meaning more than 5 grams, actually had a dramatically lower next-day recovery score. We're talking 51% compared to nearly 74% for the low-protein group. Now, why on earth would a little extra protein hurt the recovery? Well, context is everything. This higher intake almost always happened on the weekends. It wasn't the cheese stick hurting their recovery, guys. It was staying up super late, eating junk food, and maybe having a few drinks. It is the lifestyle, not the snack itself. So, what this means for you? We've got all this incredible data from elite athletes, but let's translate this into practical, actionable takeaways for your own life, especially if you're the kind of person tracking your sleep and recovery every night. First off, do not fear the midnight snack. A couple hundred calories of popcorn or a cookie is not going to scientifically ruin your sleep architecture. Second, if you are genuinely chasing overnight muscle recovery, a single little yogurt isn't going to cut it. You've got to hit that deliberate, heavy dose of 30 to 40 grams of protein. Third, always remember your weekend context. Staying out late hurts your sleep way more than whatever food you grabbed on the way home. And finally, this is just such a powerful reminder that we desperately need more female-focused research to truly understand how these physiological mechanisms work across different bodies. So I want to leave you with this to ponder tonight. When you wake up feeling completely groggy, is it really about what you ate before bed, or is it just the stress, the timing, and the overall context of your evening? The data proves our bodies are remarkably resilient. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the data and sleep well.